all Canadian families, we are on the Titanic. The iceberg hasn't hit yet, so we're not sinking. If we don't shift course, that iceberg is coming for us.
I'm not planning on leaving. I'm fighting. We want to make this country incredibly great.
We begin to see that it really isn't about diversity. It is about punishing the people who perform beyond the mean.
For people who don't care, where do you see Canada going?
Oh, it's catastrophic. It is that bad.
What is the carbon tax doing to lower carbon emissions?
Exactly.
I love this country. I was born in this country. I believe in what this country stands for. I believe in its people. I believe as a place opportunity for all to come and live, but the path that we're on is not working. And we are not going to be what we're supposed to be if we continue along this path.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, everyone, just so you guys know, Jared and I were just chatting with Kirk in the back. He's already an impressive man.
Yeah.
Family guy, loves tech, finance. He's got some opinions, apparently. Yeah, he's got
real life experience with dealing with communism.
That's right. Born in Russia, lived in the Middle East, parts of Europe, you said, and then Canadian for the last couple decades.
Yeah.
So, Kirk, tell us a little bit about, just so our audience knows who you are. What do you do? What's a day in the life of Kirk Lubimov look like?
Except tweeting, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, minus, you still refer to it as Twitter?
It's, what do you say, Xing?
I still say Twitter.
It's Twitter.
It'll never not be Twitter.
I know, it's a verb, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It works.
Exactly, man.
Yeah. So I primarily work on the venture capital side on investment and trying to figure out where tech and economics are going to be looking like in 10, 20 years and what the investment into the future looks like. So trying to predict the intersection of capital flow, policy, and technological evolution, essentially.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you've done some advising for different companies. Even it looks like when it comes to political parties in our nation, you've kind of dabbled around in that too.
Yeah, I've worked with essentially all political stripes.
Okay.
If it's a good policy or a bad policy, I'll be there to help guide that. I think to race to better ideas is the way to build a democracy rather than race to the bottom in policy or being afraid to talk about certain policies. So. So I'm on that side of the spectrum of where we're trying to, I guess, guide this country into.
Thank God, man. There's somebody else.
I know. I have so many questions about policy and the process. Like, even, I would love to dive into what it means to dissect a policy, and then also, my question is if you disagree with it, do they just shut the door on you, or?
Yeah, it happens a lot.
Really?
It's probably, some people may not like it. It probably happens more on the conservative side than anything.
Yeah, where they shut the door on you if you disagree.
Yeah. It's I think the conservative side in general is a little more walking on shells right now, trying to, not approach DI, not approach this, not approach that. It's trying to stay this conservative, balanced. Stay out of hot topics because they're afraid to get hit by mainstream media, a bad article, someone hurt their feelings, which is I think the complete opposite of the way to do things these days. So I would like to champion and encourage the conservatives to really try to push the envelope as much as it can, because essentially our future is dependent on it. Yeah. Right. So we need to make sure that we're talking about much more important things and be a leader in the conversation rather than be on the reactionary side, which is what's happening right now.
That is such a good phrase you said, though, walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
And if you look at the history, though, even we were talking a little bit about the convoy earlier, and you look at the effects of conservative leadership, both provincial and federal, in the last 7 years, when it comes to big issues, it seems like every leader was so afraid to take a hardline stance on something. Just, here's what I think. I'm unapologetic about it. I think it's reasonable. And they all pay the price for it. And interesting you brought that up now, because you're right. There is this avoidance, and it's actually the complete opposite of what's happening in the U.S. With current leadership, where it's like unapologetic. Here's what I believe, and he's take it or leave it. I don't care which side you take, but take it or leave it. There's no. It's almost you respect, even if you disagree, you can respect someone who says they're unapologetic about what they think.
This it's a straightforward approach, right? It's there is no. If you do things when it's politically convenient, you're essentially using people, right? Rather than be there and standing up for people, which is, I think, a different way of thinking of the representation you will get, right? Even during the pandemic, how many people on the conservative side, or any side really, were against closing businesses? Like, we didn't really see anyone on, when it was politically inconvenient, standing up and, for people's livelihoods, really, right? And now we're paying the price for it economically, financially, and everything else, right? Because it was essentially, you shut down an economy, then you print a whole bunch of money, and now we're on the other side of it, of trying to deal with that, of the offshoot of the side effects of what has been done.
So in your, you said when you were describing what you do, you said this intersection of technology and investment, or venture capitalism. What's your Cole's Notes version of the situation we're in with technology and investment in Canada?
So
it's a huge question.
In Canada.
It's a huge question.
In Canada, So I look at it from the perspective of what will our society look like in the future? And I think we're moving so quick with such big jumps and changes. I'm going to throw it out there. I haven't really said it like publicly too much, but let's roll with it.
Let's go.
Let's just take AI for where we at now with AI. And its current capabilities and essentially its IQ level translation. Okay, so let's say that's 120. Why would we immigrate people with IQ below that?
Interesting thought.
Right?
Cool. Crazy.
Why would we do that? Right? So
are we going to kick out Canadians who are below 120?
No, but I'm saying in general, that's cool. We can use it as whatever, right? So we have technological tools at our disposal to use to better our industries, economies, society, whatever, right? So previously throughout history, we essentially depended on human beings for a lot of that, right? So the question is, how do we pick who immigrates to Canada, right? Mass immigration is a big topic in Canada, right? Because it was disastrously done. It was such a bad policy that essentially everyone admits to it now. So the question is, how do we pick the best people going forward? Because we're still going to need immigrants, and it's in our best interest to pick the best immigrants, right? It's just a competitive advantage situation. So how do we think about technology, and who do we pick because of what changes it will bring, right? We don't need anyone essentially less capable of what the technology brings us. Right, so which is such a huge mind shift that I don't think anyone is really talking about it yet. Well,
I'll give you a very real world example in my experience. In what we do here in the television channels that we run, we often have to call on lawyers and discuss things with lawyers and work them all through. And
this is one of Jeremy's biggest.
It's one of my biggest frustrations is because they're $500-$600 an hour. And an explanation on something is often a 9-minute response. And so and
do you get an answer?
Well, the answer, you get an answer. You don't get clarity. You don't get direction. In fact, you walk away probably with more questions than you had.
It's a lot of depends.
Yes, exactly. Depends on this. Depends on this. Depends on this. And I'm paying you $550 an hour. Give me some clarity. And so here's my real world example is in that I walk away out of there and extrapolate that over a year's time. You spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 of lawyers for certain situations over a year. I'm going $40,000. Like then you go into AI and you say, hey, from a lawyer's perspective, what would be the top 10 things to advise me in here, and what's happened before, what's happened in Canada, what about my province? Tell me about every case that's ever happened. It'll just spit it all out. Then you can cross compare that, grab it on another AI, do the same thing. And so my whole point on this is that I think AI, the reason you hire an expertise is because they have limited information that you don't have access to, but now we do.
Yeah.
And so it's exactly the same thing, a comparison you're saying, is that why would you bring people in who have lesser? The same reason why I wouldn't call a lawyer who has lesser. If I have access to all the information at a push of a button, why would I call the lawyer?
So, Kirk, when you pose that question, I know you're kind of playing a hypothetical
Yes, of
now,
course.
but are you talking about right now, or are you predicting like 10 years in the future?
So this is actually an interesting question because, and this is kind of my thesis, actually more on the robotic side.
Okay.
So let's say in the last 3 years, 4 years, essentially we brought in 3, plus million people, right? A lot of it is lower skilled, we also have a hard time trying to use their credentials to actually, say, okay, you actually have maybe more skills and more knowledge. It's not working out. But so the thing is, what things may look long term are actually are sooner situation than people think. So as robotics get adopted, for example, let's just take a warehouse example of a warehouse, right? Like Calgary is a big warehouse supply chain destination. So is Balzac now. It's essentially all immigrants working there, right? It's 90%, staffing agency based, recent immigrants. But then you look at warehouses like Amazon, and it's all robotics, right? So, and that allows you to, warehouses in general are very unproductive because with humans, it's hard to use to overall square footage and scale, right? Because humans essentially walk around the floor. So with robotics, you can utilize much more of your overall volume and your square footage in your warehouse. So it's a lot more efficient, and it's a lot faster.
And they don't have to go home at 5 o'clock
or ask for raises. Right?
Yeah.
So we're getting to this point of where mass adoption of robotics is cheaper per hour than a human being, right? And you also, as a society in general, you don't want a human being moving a box from A to B. It's so unproductive. It's so useless. You want that human being trying to cure cancer, right? You want to bring up the overall expertise within your society up, right? You don't want to be relying on this brute labor, which is essentially, what we did for the last 100,000 years, right? Now we're just doing it in a warehouse. But now you can do that with robots, right? So if you keep mass immigrating those people or that working class, while you have technological evolution in that situation, they'll be replaced, right? They'll be out of a job. So the question you have to ask yourself is now, how do you upscale, or how do you provide for 2, 3, 4, 5 million people that have no jobs? Right? Who's paying for that? Right? And what's the time frame for that? Right? Robot or piece of software you can change and update in months or a couple minutes, depends what it is, right? A human being could take years, right? So the important thing of going forward in a society is to make sure you don't get stuck, so you don't stack that labor force on the bottom of your pyramid of skill, right? Because afterwards they'll be essentially obsolete within 5-10 years, and then what do you do with them? Right. So it's a very pivotal moment in our society going forward that I don't think a lot of people consider when they're talking about policies.
Do you think it's significantly different now than it has been? Because like I can even think back to when I was a young kid and hearing my parents sometimes talk about some new innovations in tech, and I think they were almost always afraid or saying what we're saying now, being like, oh, what's this? We're going to adopt this new thing.
Yeah. So there is obviously technological evolution has been through our time for a long time. So the difference is now we have mass immigration, right? So the transition of people is a lot different, right? And that gives different scale to situations, right? There's a difference between trying to adjust, when, our parents were kids, and it's a couple 100,000 people essentially to now we're bringing extra 3 million people.
Yeah,
to take
10%
care
of the country.
Yeah. So, and plus our education system has to be rethought, reworked. So the economies of scale are a lot different now that we're dealing with, and things are moving a lot faster, right? Like, if you look the transition through the industrial evolution, right? It's things have gone from when people were hammering a part in to electrification, which changed the assembly lines and everything else. So that took years, right? Now it doesn't take years. Now it takes instant. But technology is allowing to open a lot of new, higher skilled labor that we need to fulfill. So we want, as a society in general, is to get people into their role, right? So we want to make sure that we move the quality of our society up rather than being stuck and below the bottom level of it.
So from the humanities side of things, it sounds like with the advancement of technology, because there's the physicality side, robotics is taking over. Obviously, you see major companies, Tesla, Amazon, these guys are at the forefront who are, like Elon has been wide open about Optimus and right and getting them in Tesla factories. So it is replacing labor. People are going to be left behind in a merit-based society. So are you saying it's putting people in a position where they kind of have to develop other skills to be able to not be left behind? Because in Canada, we can't afford to, right now we can't afford the people we have. But then if you have another million people that are no longer in the jobs that they were in beforehand, what is that? I guess my question is, economically, how do we handle that as Canada, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think the continued upskilling is just a thing that will be naturally happening in our society moving forward.
Okay.
Unless you're probably on the blue collar side, I think those hard skills of building houses, actually having like real life applicable skills to create things. I think that won't change for a long time. It's just essentially we need those, which are a really good education point. But even they are started being changed with technology. Even just searching for gold is a lot different now. It's very AI based. China found one of the biggest gold deposits in the world recently, apparently.
Really?
And it was all based on different scanning technologies. Had nothing to do with how we used to explore for things, right?
Drill.
Yeah. So it's so things like this will be aided with tech, but the question is for us and for everything else, like, right? Like even your typical fast food restaurants, like there's already places in the world where it's fully automated, right?
Yeah.
So the problem we have here is we have people that are choosing that as a career, right? Yeah. So which does not align together with the future. And as a society, why would you want someone to choose flipping a burger and dipping fries in oil as a career? It's because they don't have any other economic options.
No choice. Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to figure out that flip, because that the future is going to come fast for some people, and those people are going to be essentially stuck on social support, right? So we want to make sure, how do we empower people to move up economically, so we can move our whole society up economically. Yeah. And I think this is why, especially with this tariff talk with the U.S., when people say, let's become 51st state or whatever, I've been always against it in general, but we have such an opportunity because we have a smaller, just sheer amount of people. We have 42 million versus 350 million, that we can do things better and faster within our society than you can do with 350 million, and you can provide differently for 40 million people with our economic structure than you can do for 350 million. So if we just use what we have for our benefit, like we can have a total different society. We just don't really do that. It's just essentially the way politics is. We just don't do drastic changes.
Well, we have the raw material, the raw skill. We have the basics of what you need to have an amazing country that could be leading the world. Yeah. Really, we have the foundation is there, right? It's just we've been stupid.
I know it's amazing what we have here, right? Everything from farmland to, critical minerals and everything. Like it's, you essentially never have to leave Canada.
The critical mineral, I was watching that this morning. I didn't realize, like even with uranium, lithium, nickel, we have some of the largest supplies, and we're one of the largest exporters of all of those.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, considering how small we are. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, we have the Shield Formation in Canada, which is essentially kind of goes from Winnipeg, Northwest Territories up around to Ontario and Quebec. That is like one of the oldest parts of North America. So it's it's really full of resources essentially in there.
Before we move on to more Canada stuff, what are you most excited about when it comes to tech and the advancement of AI? Like, what is the pinnacle thing? You're like, this is the coolest thing I'm excited for.
It's not as much as AI. What I'm the most excited about is essentially quantum computing.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So that's primarily the thing I try to focus people into more.
Okay.
Because quantum computing is essentially a total paradigm shift in computation. So it's essentially an arm race. So AI, a lot of people consider AI an arms race, but quantum computing really changes everything because it's more than a million times more powerful than our most powerful computer right now.
Yeah.
So the way you can calculate and achieve things with it changes everything, and it will change everything for the economies that have access to it.
Who are the major players in quantum computing right now?
Oh, it's definitely the US and China, and actually Canada has a quantum strategy, and it has a couple of really leading quantum.
Sorry, go ahead. I didn't interrupt you.
Couple of quantum development companies. It's just we just don't have enough capital to fund them, right? It's that's the unfortunate part. Like D-Wave, for example, out of Burnaby there, they moved their head office down to California, unfortunately. But they were one of the pioneers, and Google and other companies have invested millions of dollars into them. But if Canada invested, $5 billion into them, we'll be probably in the top 3 right now for sure.
Can you give us what's quantum computing compared to traditional computing? Like what differs it?
Yeah, so traditional computing, essentially how everything operates right now is binary, right? So it's 0 and 1s. Whereas, so whenever you do a calculation, it's really binary, right? There's just the essentially computation power, all the chips, all the races is how fast it can do that. And software helps write it faster, helps guide it faster as well, if you will. And quantum computing, it can be in either state. It can be 0 or 1 at the same time. So the calculations that it can derive are much faster because it can do many calculations at the same time. So something that can take, like I said, your most powerful computer 1 million years to calculate, a quantum computer can do it like in a couple of minutes. So it's a total, so whenever you're thinking about material discovery and medicine and everything else, that would take years of hypothesis in a lab and years of hypothesis in different calculations, putting different compounds together. It could take decades. You can do it with quantum computing within months.
I want to show you this and get your opinion on it. I saw this the other day, and I'm going to cast it there. This is what made quantum computing clear for me, for someone who doesn't speak your language necessarily. But
is TV on?
I don't know. I don't see anything there.
Can we check if that TV's on? We got to cast something. Maybe it is. Sweet. Okay. Thank you.
I got it there.
Oh, I was looking on the wrong one. I was looking at the other one. Cool.
So you'll see the maze on the left in maze A. That's a traditional binary, as you're saying, where it's making a decision. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
See, and it has to go through every little part to make sure that it gets a no.
Yeah, to find the exit. Yeah. And then quantum here is B. You'll notice it at every decision it splits off and it can discover
exactly
all simultaneously at the same time. And so when you magnify those mazes and multiply them 10x of that, that's
and in real life, the quantum maze would have been done in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Before the real computer would have even started.
Because there was a chip that I think it was Google that just came up with. Was it Google? Or the chip that was talking about the numbers were outrageous, where it was saying traditional formulas that they used to get computers to do as like a stress test for speed. This new chip apparently was like, the numbers were outrageous. It was saying that it could do 170,000 years of computing of a traditional computer in, I think they said 3 minutes or 4 minutes.
Yeah. It's a total different change.
Just nuts.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people even understand it, because it's essentially, going against someone with, a rock and a stick, and they have nuclear bombs. Right. So it's you want to pick which side you want to be on. Right?
My gosh.
So
you mentioned the countries that are leading, specifically what companies would be the leaders in it.
I'm so
Are they the
fascinated by this.
big seven, like you have Google and Microsoft, or is there other companies that are actually not as...
there is direct like companies that just do just quantum computing and the developmental side of it, right? But Google and all those companies essentially have the money to invest in it.
Totally.
So
so they're the big investors.
What would happen if a quantum computer started to try to solve the blockchain for Bitcoin? Would it be just done right away? Or what are your thoughts on that? That's a thought I've had.
It's an interesting question, because it's kind of essentially one of the conversations in that
space,
cryptography world. Yeah. And
could it do you think it could solve it all in seconds?
Well, it's not a question of solving, it's a question of breaking into the system, right? Is interrupting the chain. So you can upgrade the Bitcoin system.
Yeah.
My take on it is, when you get to the part, it's so irrelevant, because everything else that it can do before that is the least of your worries is Bitcoin.
Well, the reason my mind goes there is because it's so disruptive for that crypto world. If it could, there's so much money invested, so many people, But you're saying that's not even. You're still saying that's not even a sliver compared to that.
Yeah, right. It's a $3 trillion essentially economy, right? Whereas the world is,
of course.
Multiples of that. So, why would you care to go after crypto when you can just shut down whole governments and interrupt whole cash flows, right, and everything else?
Wild.
So it's a total different shift to how to think about the future, because everything that we build up to it right now, technologically wise, is essentially obsolete, and they already have the power right now to do anything they want with it. Right? It's just not bigly commercially available, right?
So in theory, all the tech advancement in the last 30 years, as quantum computing becomes more available, it could be done in minutes.
Yeah.
If you think about it, how fast we've gone
seconds,
to where we are.
actually.
So and obviously for every, I think for every good thing that is developed, there's also a counterpart that could be on the bad side. Mm-hmm. So what happens with quantum computing in the wrong hands when it comes to whatever you want to think of? They try to get into governments. They deal with, you know what I mean? Like all the negative consequences.
Yeah, there's nothing that really stopping it right now, right?
Yeah.
Because it's, so the question is, which country is going to use it? So quantum is a physical computer. It's very finicky, right? You essentially touch it and it doesn't work. Like it just can't be vibrated. It can be, so, so you can't just go sit in in a cafe and hack your Goldman Sachs next door and take all their money. It just won't work like that for a long time.
Yeah.
But the question is, which bad actor state might have access to it, right? Like if I was, China is in it, but if I was Iran or other things, it's like who cares about building a nuclear bomb anymore, right? Just go try after, go after the whole, industries, right? With quantum computing or other tech, right? Because you can.
And, sorry, I don't mean to, I'm just trying to dumb this down for me. So you're essentially, if it gets in the wrong hands and someone's savvy enough, essentially it's like you're alluding to like the hacking and the manipulating of markets with this type of power.
You could, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the dark side of it. It could be that. Obviously, there's huge upside. But in fact, probably more upside. But still, the danger of it, I guess, would be disrupting New York Stock Exchange, those types of things where you could...
Yeah, you can shut down the whole SWIFT,
international banking system.
But the opportunities of it is huge. So, but obviously the cybersecurity aspect of it is, and it's already a growing industry because people are realizing they're going to have to solve issues here. It's such an exciting future for humanity, really. Yeah. Right? Because you can discover so many things quicker.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just can't get away from this quantum side. Sorry. I would imagine that security, once it becomes universally available to everybody, the cyber security side will also have access to it. So it'd be quantum versus quantum, and thus stonewalled possibly if it becomes mainstream.
Well, it'll be the same as cybersecurity
Yeah,
essentially now, right? It's just, but there is so much new industries that's going to be built out of it.
Yeah.
It just so countries have to think about the future, how they participate in that. Right?
So cool.
Right.
That's crazy. Man.
You said something a little bit earlier regarding a specific company in Burnaby that moved down to California, and we couldn't get the funding. We know that with Canadian policies over the last number of years, we have seen a lot of capital. Like, it's no longer coming into Canada. It's more so, I think we're at a net negative in terms of investment capital. Is that correct? Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't attract the same capital.
So that's reasons why we're losing companies like this.
And not developing new ones. That's
Okay.
that's one of the problems, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Like you look, I posted a photo before of when Trump inauguration, and you have Elon Musk sitting there, Zuckerberg, you know, all those big
Google
five.
CEO, you had Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, and it's you're talking about there's like almost $10 trillion of actual market cap there, right? Directly, indirect, which is 5 times the Canadian economy, and it's like, why can't we develop any of that?
Yeah.
Right. That's something that we should be asking ourselves, right?
Well, in theory, we're a free market country. In
I like
theory,
that theory. Yeah.
I think there's aspects of it that is still around, but we have so much bureaucracy, so much red tape, and we have bad priorities in terms of what we're prioritizing. And I think we've talked a lot about this now. People are finally on all sides of the spectrum, both sides of the aisle. People are starting to actually feel it in their pocketbook to where they're like, hey, this wasn't such a good idea. Like, look how expensive life is for me now. Right. And it seems like that's the when push comes to shove, people are now realizing, okay, climate change is like, cool. I want to make sure our Earth is good.
Yeah.
But at what expense or at what cost, right? Is it costing me? And so those are the real hard questions that people are realizing and learning the hard way. But interesting to see all that happen.
Yeah, it's a question of short term and long term as well, right? It's like, what companies are we developing here for people to have a livelihood from in the future, right? And the other thing in economics in general, right? You can be producing or buying the production, right?
Yeah.
So as a country, we want to be producing things so other people can buy, so we can have an economy, right? If we just print money to consume other people's production, we have a really bad economy, right? And we essentially been going down the direction, which is the complete opposite of what we should do to strengthen ourselves.
You were mentioning off camera before the idea behind venture capitalists, and when you start to invest and you're looking long-term with your investment, you said it takes about 13 years for you to start to realize it's not short-term, even medium-term investing. You're really going long-term, right? And that makes sense because you look at early guys who were in Facebook, and you look at these guys, how many years they were able to put money in there, and it eventually started to go. When it comes to that type of thing, investment for long-term, I was looking, I forget what event it was, but CEO for NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, he was basically, I feel like he gave like a playbook for what people should be if you want to invest and you want to invest long term. Do you remember the name of the event they had maybe 3 months ago?
Was it their new product announcement?
Yeah, something like that. But he gave like a 30-minute speech outlining like essentially the areas of where the next industries are going to grow rapidly, right? If you want to catch the big tech companies like that are big now early, this is where you go. What do you think those specific industries are? If people are looking to invest long-term or see where we're going in 10, 12 years, how would you categorize those industries?
Yeah, so that's actually a good example of a company that if you held it for 5 years, you essentially made no money on it, right? But it's essentially started picking up recently, right?
Yes,
so
last 3 years.
So even in the public markets, it's essentially true. If you hold good pivotal companies, you just don't sell them. That's where the money is made.
Yeah,
right?
patience.
It's patience, right? You just, if you buy a good company, you have no reason to ever sell it. Yeah. Right? So
unless you're looking for a quick buck.
Right? So there is a saying about day trading in general, right? They buy a stock for 15 to sell when it's 16, then rebuy it when it's 20, it's sell in 21, they buy it when 35, and then they sell at 36, but they missed the point that they could have just bought it, left it, and it's worth 36 now. Right? Rather than making, a couple bucks here and there. So, it's actually interesting because you kind of spoke against quantum computing a little bit, and he threw off the markets, which I don't think anyone agreed with him. And Microsoft came out against it very shortly. But robotics is definitely, space is a huge. Nobody essentially even knows what will happen with space technology, but it's everyone is throwing money at it, so it's a big
space. Outside the Earth, you're talking about.
Rocket technology, right? Because all those things take decades to develop.
Yes.
Right. So, so that's a huge industry. So robotics, that AI, obviously, but quantum computing is probably the biggest. Also, obviously, chip technology and all the industry that will be supporting all that.
Yeah.
Right. Because there'll be a lot of demand for sub industries. So,
do you think the Americans made it to the moon?
Why not? With the help of Canadians. Their plan to go to the moon was essentially a hot air balloon until Canada came in with our expertise, that we had back then, right? Our arm, our design for the shuttle.
Have you watched the videos lately, though? Like, I've never not been against them.
I can't trust those videos. Are those even legit?
I don't know. That's what I don't know.
Thing.
Have you looked at the videos, though, recently?
No, like the
moon landing videos?
I don't know.
You're right. I don't know if they're like AI or fake, because if they're real, they look like the most.
What's your opinion on that?
Okay, we're getting to know each other. I hope we can continue to get to know each other. Jeremy and I really aren't conspiracy theorists.
Not at all.
I am kind of like a cosmic skeptic when it comes to conspiracies. It's
you
like,
almost need to be.
I understand you're passionate, and it's easy to spin. Like, I feel like I can spin anything.
Of course.
Like I can play devil's advocate. Like I'm decently good at that, so I understand that game. And I've never taken to this idea that it's come that I was like, yeah, of course we've been to the moon, and for cost and all those things, we just haven't gone back. But then when I heard an argument like maybe 3 months ago, it just opened the door a sliver for me to be like, okay, like if we find out we didn't, I'd be willing to accept it. And what it was that in the 60s, I guess the basic argument is in the 60s, we managed to send something 3,000 times farther than we've ever sent an astronaut since on 1/1,000,000th of the computing, or 1/10,000th of the computing power of what we have on our cell phones. And it kind of showed just the scale of what was required to send something so far with how little technological advancement we had at the time compared to now. I'm like, okay, that's a little interesting to me too, but again, I'm not in the space, so I'm not.
And there's a lot of fishy, weird things. Like, so apparently a lot of the tech is gone that we had, and a lot of the records are all gone.
They destroyed a lot of the gear and the equipment, and
then also too, just my surface level logic is like, why have we never gone back? Why is there never?
But what is there to do there?
Dominate.
Hang on, man. Like it's outside.
I don't know. Put a flag there, at least something.
Ask
that you can
Elon.
look through a telescope. Imagine if you could look through a telescope and see a Canadian flag or an American flag. That would be the ultimate flex. But yes, you're right. That's a very expensive flex.
Like when I think of space travel, I think like Interstellar. Like that's cool, but we're not there.
That's the best movie ever.
Oh, it is. Yes, sir.
Dude, you are welcome back to the show.
Yeah, you're gonna get a picture on the shelf now for that.
I literally couldn't sleep like 3 weeks ago at 2 a.m. I put it on and it's like. So good.
And it was filmed here in Calgary.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You know that scene where they were driving through the truck through the cornfields?
Yeah.
They bought that whole field, planted their own crops.
Yeah, I saw that,
so they could do that and then sold the crops because
And
it was cheaper.
And they sold it all for a profit too.
Yeah,
Really?
They made a money off
because it's cheaper than renting someone's field. They figure, let's just buy it, grow, film, and sell.
Wow.
Anyways, I don't really have a theory. I'm not taking a hard stance on it. It's just, I will say though, I love the emphasis being put back on. I love what SpaceX is doing. I love that Jeff Bezos is starting to get into it. I know there's other companies I'm not as familiar. I love the idea when Elon Musk said maybe a year and a half ago on Joe Rogan, when he asked him the question, how long till we can go on Mars? And he's like, 5 years. Like that excites me.
Yeah.
I love that idea of things. So
add 15 years to anything that Elon says, but it's at least we have the direction, right? Like nobody even really talks about it before, but now at least we have a space race again, right? Like
for sure.
India is sending stuff, China is sending stuff out there, so
it's fun.
I got to show you guys this.
Let's see.
I don't know if it just seems so fake. I can't even watch it. I have and still do always believe we've landed on the moon. But after watching these things, I'm like, come on. And who's... I don't know, man. I just don't know.
Is that a real video?
I don't
That's the thing. You don't know what's what anymore.
I know. And now you can't trust video anymore at all.
What are they claiming that video to be?
Apollo 17 liftoff from moon, December 14th, 1972.
So who's filming that though?
Exactly. That's always the question too. Whenever I see a guy jumping, I'm like, who's holding the camera right now?
Cut.
Okay, again, this is... I'm disappointed in myself for saying this because beforehand you said you like to deal with facts and all that.
I know.
This is not a fact.
This is pure question.
This is, I think I remember somebody saying, but there were directors that were hired in the 70s and the 60s to film certain things in studios, I think as, not as propaganda, but to promote certain ideas of space travel and all that. And I think some of those videos are getting mixed in with what's being recovered now too.
100% agree. It's probably a good probability that happened, right? Because it's essentially like a documentary, right?
Yeah.
That they had to promote. Remember, this was during the Cold War, right?
Yep.
So they had to produce that as propaganda essentially for power anyways, right? So I would assume at least that they did some of that.
Yeah. That's a good point.
That's fun.
I'd
Okay,
actually never
so
heard that.
space companies, Kirk Lubimov says invest in them.
Oh, no.
Not financial advice.
Not financial, yeah.
Yeah, not
now we're in
financial
trouble.
advice.
Disclaimer.
We're throwing darts at a board here.
Yeah.
Could we have a good tech space in Canada? Like, do we got the makings for it?
Yeah, why not? I mean, anyone can have that, right? Our education system at that secondary level is not that bad.
Okay.
I mean, we don't have a lot of options, but I mean, to essentially 5 good schools in that space that we have is what we're rolling with. So we just need capital, right? That's the problem. We're just afraid to invest into things.
Yeah.
And is it ourselves afraid to invest, or we're just not attracting outside capital, or is it both?
A bit of both.
Okay.
Like a lot of people don't think the government should invest money, especially on the conservative side. I think it's a completely wrong way to look at it. I think we should be investing in things. It's just things that have multiplier effect into the economy, but also things that are strategically important into our future. Every essentially dollar has an ROI potential on it. So you want to invest into things that have that, that return on it. And government has an important role to do in it. But we should definitely be trying to invite capital, be attractive for capital, because that's the cheapest way to do it as well, right? We don't have to print it. We have to do anything. We just have to change a few laws and be, boom, economically viable, right? Which is, I'm not sure why a lot of people don't get it, right? Because it's someone else's money that we're using for our future. But so one of the things, like if you look at the US, like they have a lot of money and always had for innovation, right? It's essentially what got them in transitioning from the first industrial revolution to the second industrial revolution was they had money for risk. Even going back then, right? Over 100 years ago. We don't have that. So but what that creates into US is people who are successful, who sell things, and then the money enters the economy, and then it brings other entrepreneurs up. Right? So it trickles down, for example, you brought up NVIDIA, like there's a lot of people there, just staff, right? Just employees that are multimillionaires because they've been there, right? And that creates economic effects for the rest of the country, right? You can name a whole bunch of companies that have that, right? Canada doesn't have that yet. So that is one of the important things why we need to get scaling and investing in things so that the economy can snowball itself, where we don't have that initial strong amount of capital yet. where they have essentially, they get 2% of pension funds into venture capital essentially. And they have that whole ecosystem of people that made a lot of money, become angel investors, become whatever, X, Y, and Z supporters, where we don't have that snowball effect yet from the economy, from tech yet. So, but once we get to that position, then we can start rolling, right? Europe is taking the complete opposite role with red taping X, Y, and Z again, which is so dumb, right? Because it stops that innovation, it stops the development, right? So right now we're essentially consuming from the US, right? Why not develop things that can be consumed from Canada?
Well, and we have to create the environment for them to be able to pull it off and do it. Like even there was a photo I think I posted or I saw from your ex, Amazon
Twitter.
to close all 7 of its warehouses in Quebec, the one you posted there, stuff like that, where we even saw that in I think it was Ontario, there was a car manufacturer, 1,700 employees laid off, and this is all in the horizon of tariffs, but they're all running to the U.S. And so we don't seem to be bringing in policies that cultivates an environment for that.
Yeah,
and it's we're feeling it.
Yeah, but we need to create that success snowball into the economy. Because then the government can just step back a little bit.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
We need that success generated and trickling into the economy.
Yeah,
which we kind of, Calgary is built essentially a successful oil and gas, right? People make money, they get high 6 figures, they get stock options, blah, blah, blah. And that brought up our economy. That's why Alberta and everything else is so well ahead of, GDP per capita, all those things is because of that, right?
Yeah.
We just need that on a national scale with tech as well.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of work to be done to get that on a national scale,
Yeah.
I think, to get that mindset. Thanks for hanging with us on this episode.
Yeah.
We're going to have you back.
Yeah, it's been
We're going to talk a lot more about Canada and other stuff as well. Anything else you want to say?
No, let us know in your comments, guys, any thoughts that you have for him, and let us know kind of what you are experiencing as far as your job, your life, your money, your taxes spent. What's your experience, so we can respond to it, talk about it, and also bring on more guests like this.
And let us know, have we been to the moon?
Yeah, what's your
we
guys'
want to hear your thoughts. Have we been or have we not? The space progress and the space race is fun to watch. I will say that. All right, guys, we'll catch you later. Thanks for hanging.
Show goes on.
Show goes on.